So my name is Matt Nowina, and I'm a solutions architect with Amazon Web Services. If people had told me that I was going to be following a guy on a hoverboard with a megaphone, I might not have opted to do this. But Alex did a great job giving me a little introduction about me. I usually like to, just introduce myself, get to know people a little bit. But now that you know that my name, I'm from Toronto. I was the first SA hired at AWS for Canada, and in light of recent breaches, there's pretty much nothing you can't find out about me on Google. So when we were thinking about what we might like to talk about, we started to think about telling the story of Amazon. A lot of people are familiar with the retail side of the website. How many people have bought things off Amazon? All right, amazing. How many people use AWS today? Perfect. And how many people know the story of where Amazon comes from? So a few people. So that's why we thought we'd talk a little bit about this. But really what we wanted tonight to be about is our customers and their success story. So I'm going to talk to you for a few minutes, as Alex said, for about 10 minutes. And then we're going to get to hear some real success stories across the board. So for those that don't know, Amazon started out in 1994. And for those that can remember back then, 1994 was pretty much the tipping point for the internet. Everything prior to that was without a web browser. This is the first time that people were kind of getting a graphical interface and being able to use and innovate and interact with products. And our founder looked at this as an opportunity to create this retail website, and he started with books. And the reason he started with books was because there were millions of SKUs. There was the first time that really required a computer to be able to interact and house and be able to change the way that people interact with systems. And every year, our founder issues a letter to the shareholders. Has anybody read that before? A few folks? These are really critical interactions that maintain the focus for Amazon. So I wanted to bring up our first slide here, which talks about, it was a letter to the shareholders in 1997, so 3 years after the advent of Amazon. And this is the first time that we talked about using the internet to create value for its customers, really building this off of this community that we had access to. And you see, year over year, that we've maintained this vision of it being day one at Amazon, much like it is for many of your organizations as you're getting started. The other thing that's sort of interesting here is we saw in a couple of iterations, a few years later, we saw a letter to the shareholders that talked about, for the first time, the problems created in creating an application. I mean, much like many organizations that you may have been a part of, Amazon had created a monolithic architecture. We were reliant upon a single database backend, and then this created problems for being able to iterate changes or make improvements. So in 2003, there was a letter that went out to the shareholders that talked about mandating the business units interact with each other through services. And this created a whole new set of architectures. So now, for the first time, we had this idea of service-oriented architecture, but then that in and of itself created new problems as well. Many teams required common themes, databases, compute, different components. And we started to identify a core competency in building a solution that would allow people to satisfy those needs. And it's from that time, right up to 2006, that Amazon Web Services was born. So this is the first time that cloud computing has sort of been introduced. Those initial core services were things like compute, object storage, and queuing systems, which implemented loose coupling for the first time and having independently scalable aspects of your application and architecture. So now fast forward to 2016, and Amazon is here in Canada. Many of you have had access to AWS, but running in other regions around the world. So for those that don't know, in December of 2016, we launched the first region in Canada. A region is made up of 2 or more availability zones, and each of those availability zones is made up of 1 or more data centers. And the reason I talk about that is that it's important for people to understand that a region is actually made up of a cluster of services, which allows us to rethink the way that we architect for our applications. No longer do we have to have fully replicated sets across a primary site and a backup site. Now you can actually split your architecture across availability zones, have the same level of resiliency, but at half the cost. Across the globe, we have 43 availability zones in 16 geographic regions, and we're continuing to expand all the time. And I heard a lot of people who are looking for jobs or interested in it. We wanted to just point out that Amazon has over 90 positions available today. So much like many of you, we're looking for talent, and I encourage you to talk to any of the architects who are in the room, any of the other folks from Amazon. Actually, if I pause for a second, can everyone who helped volunteer at the Ask the Architect booth put their hand up? So you can see along the edge there, if you didn't get a chance, there are many folks who came from Amazon and are happy to interact with you. We're going to have a social hour at the end, so if you have any questions, you want to learn more, please feel free to reach out to us. This is really what it's all about, though, is our customers. So you can see that we've got tens of thousands of Canadian customers on the platform today. We've got a few of them featured up there, and we have even more who are actually going to be up and presenting their experiences. Interesting facts about where we decided to locate. So this region was launched in the Montreal area, but in Quebec, and largely because we could be powered by hydropower. We've made a significant commitment to using renewable energy to power our regions, and wanted to demonstrate that in Canada. As well, we've got 2 sort of lighthouse customers who launched in the region. Those are Salesforce and Workday, who both migrated their SaaS applications into the Canadian region as soon as it was launched. This is another snapshot of who our Canadian customers are. You can see many brands up here that you're probably familiar with. We'd love to talk to you about how they've been able to innovate on the platform and what their successes have been. As well, work with you to understand where you're trying to go. Where you're trying to go and what you're trying to do with the platform. And that's part of why I'm up here tonight. As a solutions architect, I have a really fun job. I get to work with customers of all sizes, from startups to enterprise, who are looking to do something different, to gain access to services that they didn't previously have, and to help them think about how they can change their products and services. You guys have already seen the quote. I wanted to kind of bring it back to those early days. This is a quote by Mark Andreessen. Does everyone know what he's famous for? Netscape. He was also actually the developer of the first browser, the Mosaic browser. Yeah, I mean, now he's gotten famous as a venture capitalist, and what he's trying to say here is that when you think about how organizations have formed, how companies are built today has fundamentally changed. And any new business should consider going 100% cloud right off the start. So why is that? What have we actually seen? Well, because cloud allows you to innovate, to build on your idea, to fail fast, but to succeed and scale rapidly. This is actually one of the things that I find most interesting about the platform is it fundamentally changes the way that people approach problems. Because now, for a chance, people can go and test their hypothesis without going through a large-scale acquisition. They don't have to go through a project cycle and a budgeting and try to figure out, what am I going to need in order to prove something? They can gain access to the services, they can test their theory, and they can build upon that. This is the other big reason, and this is really why we're here tonight and talking to you guys, is the idea of what's happened to the cost to launch a startup. So as much as an individual can now start an entire company with a credit card, gain access to all of the technology and services that they could have got, that companies used to have exclusive rights to. We've seen this democratizing effect across the board. You can see this cost has been brought down at a couple of different areas. First, the idea of open source scaling, horizontal scaling, bringing down the costs, then cloud technologies, and developers starting companies. So this idea of building right across that. I'm getting the card here, so I'm going to speed up a little bit. Why does AWS love startups? Because some of our best customers were startups not so long ago. You can look up here. There's examples of both famous startups as well as local startups. Scribble Live was actually started right outside my house, down by King and Adelaide. But we have other examples up here, like Earthcast, for those that aren't familiar, that's built a commercial sensor platform on the ISS, taking digital imagery across the globe and then creating an API and opening up access to it. So we see people innovating in many different ways. The fundamental benefits are summarized in agility. So gaining access to these products and services and being able to build software and solutions. Cost savings by rethinking the models in which you acquire hardware services. Elasticity, being able to grow out without having to go through complex capacity planning. Breadth of functionality. We'll touch on this at the end as well as global footprint for building out solutions. I mean, it was amazing to hear in the 10-second pitches how many different people were pitching talent or access to people on a global scale. So I hope that you keep these benefits in mind as we go through the customers tonight. Think about these, and I'd love to talk to each of you at the end of the night during the social hour about what you are looking to build next. So thank you very much.